Welcome to William Steele, True Crime and Steal the Spotlight Television. We're here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the Stonewall Museum. Now, everybody might have heard of the Stonewall Museum. There was a Stonewall Inn in New York City that was a big hangout, undercover hangout, because homosexuality actually used to be illegal in this country, cross-dressing. And so the New York police, even though the Stonewall Inn was owned by mobsters and they had the local police in payoff, there was a big raid. The Public Morals Division of the police department raided them in 1969, and a riot broke out because they were getting sick of being abused and their rights being violated to just be themselves. And despite what you might believe or what your feelings are, what leanings you have, or how you feel you were born, everybody has the right in this country especially to be free from victimization from anybody else because of your religious or sexual beliefs. So in keeping with the true crime theme of everything that I do in crime prevention, we're going to profile this museum, and I have with me the executive director, Robert Kesten. Come on, Robert. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
So look into the camera here. So Robert is the executive director of the Stonewall, and it's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yes.
And it's all over the internet, and they are expanding their footprint nationally and looking to collaborate with other people to accomplish that. He's going to give us a quick tour of this place and sit down for an interview. And so I want to just give you a panoramic view of this place. If you want to just film right here and then show the beautiful sign that's up there. Maybe you can zoom in on that and then come back here. So we're going to allow Robert to lead this as if he's giving somebody a tour of the museum, because that's what we're doing.
Okay.
You lead the way.
So we'll start right here. So Stonewall has the largest LGBTQ plus library in the world with over 30,000 volumes. And what's so surprising about that in a way is in 1969 and before the uprising took place at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, sending some of those books in the mail would have been a federal offense.
Oh, wow.
Most of these books, if not all of these books, would have been removed from Florida public schools because of the current policies. So what we have here is really unique because of the amount of prejudice over the course of time. And I think that most people would agree that a society that reads, a society that believes that being literate is important, is a society that takes care of its own. And so there's that conflict that goes on in the United States between those who read, those who believe that education is important, and those who really work to dumb down our society.
Right. So we're going to go give an overview of the museum, and he's going to give us a tour on camera, starting. Well, let's let you lead.
We'll come this way. So this is the Stonewall exhibit that we have up now, and anybody who knows that Stonewall in New York is a brick facade. It's an older building, and in their window they have a sign that's very similar to the one that we have here, which is neon, which they don't make that much neon anymore because neon is expensive and fragile.
And for the record, we just watched the 12-minute video here that they have to give you more of an overview. A gentleman named Tree, he's been a bartender 56 some odd years. The original Stonewall, part of it still exists. Over the years, it was other venues, and now it's been reopened as a Stonewall. It used to be an underground gay bar hangout where it was illegal to gather in that capacity in that time of American history.
So then we come in. Now, Stonewall, as you mentioned, was somewhat of a private club, even though it was a bar, but they didn't really have an official liquor license. So they paid off the police. They did what they needed to do to stay in business. So when people would come in, they would sign in. So here, why don't you sign in?
So a lot of people would, from my understanding, write Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and because they didn't want their names to be known. But I'm a celebrity, and I don't care. Although I'm not part of that lifestyle, I believe that they have a right to live free of fear of victimization, and that there's people that are maybe even well-meaning that don't even understand that what they do is sometimes not a choice. But even if it is a choice, It's between them and,
But
and
it's no more a choice than your choice.
okay.
You didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be straight. It's not a choice.
It's not a choice. Okay, so he's educating me as we go because I don't know a lot of these things. But I do know you treat people with respect and you don't victimize them for their political beliefs, their sexual orientation, and their race and things like that. I mean, we agree to that. That's been codified into law for many, many years. Few people obey the law in this country, and so victimization still occurs. So I'll sign my real name here because I'm more than happy to be here. And if you want to sign later, you can.
And so in those days, they would charge a small fee, which $3 back then was a lot of money, in order to make sure that people knew it was a club. So you're paying your club entrance fee rather than just going into a bar. What made Stonewall so special back in those days was that it had a dance floor. So most places, most bars didn't have dance floors, and it was illegal actually to dance in bars. They had to have a cabaret license or they had to have different kinds of licenses. So Stonewall had a dance floor. And because of that, people gravitated to it. It also had two parts. So one part had the bar,
Right.
and then if you walked through the archway, it took you into the other part, which was the dance floor and the tables. So we've sort of merged those two things here in order to make it work. But the whole place was painted black by the mob after a fire. And it was because they didn't want to spend any money on decorating. They didn't want to spend any money on ambience. But because it had a dance floor and because it had a jukebox, people didn't really care. It also did not have running water.
Oh, wow.
So if we come over here, you'll see we have this pail. And what they did is they would rinse out the glasses, the dirty glasses. So needless to say, bartenders at Stonewall did not drink liquor. They might have had a beer, but they didn't use the glassware because nobody knew how long it would take before that water would be changed. And as it was back in the 60s, there's a cigarette machine, there's a jukebox, there was a blackboard at Stonewall. This is what was on the blackboard when they raided, and so it remains a permanent fixture for us here today. There were tables, there were chairs, but most importantly, there was a place for people to dance. And that's why Stonewall was popular. It was popular with a cross-section of people.
Okay.
So there were young people, there were transvestites, there were future transsexuals, there were blacks, there were whites. Everybody went to Stonewall because you could be yourself in a way that you couldn't be yourself in almost any other place.
So they've tried to keep it true to period here. If you look around, you have a lot of the period chairs from that era. Remember, this raid happened in 1969. I believe it was June of 69.
June 28th.
So I did a very quick study on these things, and I always do my research before I do a story. Okay, so you lead the way, Roger. And we're putting light in here. Why? Why do we need this extra light?
Because in those days, first of all, as Tree told you, they didn't want to know anybody's name.
Right.
Because if the police asked you somebody's name and you didn't know, you didn't know. And that carried through from the prehistory of Stonewall through post-Stonewall, where you tried not to know more than you needed to. And relationships was so hard because of the legalities.
Right.
So therefore, people wanted to feel something, but they were always afraid that they would get caught, that they would be in trouble, that the person would do something to them, that they were being entrapped. And so people kept their distance. And that has stayed true in a large section of the population because of the historic connotations that come along with it.
And I noticed in the video that we watched here a little while ago, the guy Tree, bartender currently at Stonewall in New York City, said that even Rock Hudson would frequent the Stonewall and they would dye his hair for the movies and he had these thick glasses on. But when people would recognize him, they'd say, "Oh no, that's not Rock Hudson. That's Roy. He frequents here." But they just look alike. So they would cover for each other because there was even members of the clergy and of law enforcement that were homosexual and indulging in these private parties and wanting to feel comfortable with people that were in that same way of living. So
So back then, there was an archway that connected 51 Christopher Street to 53 Christopher Street. On June 28, 1969, after the raid, that was closed off. So now the archway doesn't exist anymore. But our archway, although it doesn't take you to another part of the bar, what it does do is it takes you back to our library. And once again, the importance of a library, not only now, but historically. Cleopatra had a library in Alexandria, Egypt. And that made Egypt the central piece in the cultural world at that time, more important than Rome. We have the Library of Congress. Every single Ivy League university proclaims how important their libraries are. And here we have a library that's dedicated to the LGBTQ community that had to be put together in a relatively short time as compared to these other institutions, because people had to write using pseudonyms. People had to do all other kinds of things to protect their other careers or their lives. Because if they used their real names, they would never be able to write another thing for a mainstream publication. So this is a really difficult task to put together this kind of stuff for the long haul. And we've done it. And we're very proud of that.
So we're back. Our friend's going to show us the rest of the museum here, starting with the library.
Okay, so we come into the library, and then as we follow around, we have these informational panels that tell the story about the community, the period, Stonewall itself, what's happened since Stonewall, which was the beginning of Pride. So this year is the 55th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. Next year will be the 55th anniversary of the first Pride. And Pride now happens all over the world in celebration of the start of the liberation movement, which started in the Stonewall Bar back in 1969.
Okay, you move on.
So
we're following your lead here.
So all of these different posters give a piece of history. So we're living with history, then we come into the light. When people started protesting as themselves, it was a small group, but nonetheless, it was the beginning of something, and that changed. These people really were about getting jobs and being in the workforce and fitting in, rather than necessarily saying, but this is how I really feel. They suppressed that and tried to fit in and look the way everybody else did. Here was a bar in the village called Julius's, where they wouldn't serve these guys drinks, and it ended up being in the New York Times, ended up going to court, and the court said, no, you have to be able to serve everybody, providing that they follow the rules. And so that changed some things, but not anywhere near enough. And then here's what the old Stonewall looked like from the outside after the uprising. So you can see windows are broken, doors are bolted shut. This is the book written way, way before that gave it the name Stonewall. It was called Bonnie's the Stonewall. It became a women's bar back in the 1930s. And when that closed, it ultimately opened up as the Stonewall Inn.
I know that name. That's a pretty famous author, I
Yes,
think.
she was but that was her pseudonym. That wasn't her real name, because she was a writer, and she wouldn't have been able to write as herself if
Gotcha.
she used her name as a lesbian.
So the bar was a homage to this book, basically, in her,
That's
her
how it
writings.
started, yes.
Okay.
And
I saw the Village People on one of them down there, and the group, the Village People. Now, I was a young man when they came out, about 13 or so, and the Village People, I actually won tickets to their concert at Madison Square Garden. Remember Harry Harrison? Harry Harrison, WABC.
Yep,
So
everybody is.
that's right. So I was, I guess, the seventh caller, right?
77 WABC.
That's right. And so I won the tickets. I went to see them. I had no clue as a kid that they were a gay group, or
Most people did not know.
and even what the village people meant. And it just dawned on me when I saw that, because they're probably from the village.
That was the point, but it was still a private joke.
Right.
And still, even today, when people do YMCA, they have no idea what that means.
Yeah, and then in the Navy, and so
Right.
that's not
And the songs are still popular. And then this was the second night of the riot. One of the things that set everything apart was that this riot, unlike anything before it, went on for night after night after night. It wasn't a one-time shot, and that is why Stonewall has the significance that it has today.
Can you get close-ups of the images and then come and get these? What's the significance of the lady in the chair? She was arrested that night, or was those
Yes.
transsexuals, or?
They're
Lesbians?
trans,
Okay,
and that's a paddy wagon. They were all being arrested, but it wasn't that night.
different night.
That was a different night.
Okay.
It was to show that this was a consistent problem.
Looks
And
like
then
Richard Gere.
These are, although her name is Mama Jean.
Hello, her name. I said it looks like Richard Gere. He said her name's Mama Jean. Hello, Richard Gere. You got to see my TV show on A&E Network. It's called Inmate to Roommate, and I'm called the funniest man in the country for a reason. So.
But she's still alive. I think she's probably around 90.
Okay.
Stormy is deceased. They're both deceased.
All right. So we're going to get into some more displays here. What do we have here instead of?
Well, here you have the same article that you had over there. Here's a different article that focuses on the crowd. This book is written by the guy who saved the Woodstock event. He had a permit, and when Woodstock, the planners of that concert, lost their permit, he used his permit, and he secured the land where the concert took place, the farm, and he also lived in the village,
Okay.
right around the corner from Stonewall. So he wrote this book primarily about his experiences, and in it he includes what happened at Woodstock and what happened at Stonewall. So it's interesting how these seminal things that happened in 1969, some of the people were the same people.
Interrelated. You're gonna make it work no matter what. Basically, you're gonna find a way around it. We all do. We all find our ways around things. Even to this day, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it to to do what's within our comfort zone. I want you to zoom in, if you can, on that headline right there. See how disgusting the news coverage was at the time. I find that very, very offensive. I don't think a headline like that would go today. And again, for the algorithms and YouTube and Rumble and all my channels, we're doing an informational documentary type show here today to show the historical significance of the struggles that a protected class of people have had, despite the laws being on their side. They're still going through it. So let's go through this some more.
Randy Wicker was a very well-known activist.
Okay. Saturday Night Fever.
Well, this was, they invaded our rights, and this was what happened 4 a.m. on the second morning. So it kept going and going and going. And even in the rain, it kept going.
Okay, so what do we have behind me here?
And then in this case, first off, at the top, you've got two proclamations, one by Broward County and one by the city of Fort Lauderdale, saluting Pride Month. And then here is an op-ed that I wrote for the Miami Herald that kicked off Pride this year. In the case, you have pictures that you have seen, some of which are on these posters. There's I don't know if that's a book or, yeah, a book. Here, interestingly, this article here was on page 33 of the New York Times, the first night of the riot. It was in the alley, so probably a lot of people missed it. And the headline is, 4 policemen hurt in village raid. Very little about the significance or why or what. The second night, this was on page 22, also in the alley, and this one is police again, root village rioters. Not very significant in terms of what was actually going on. And then if you go all the way over to the other side, that article was on the New York Times front page. But it's not about the riots at all. What it's about is a group of vigilantes who cut down trees in a park in Queens because they didn't want gay people in their neighborhood. So what gets on the front page is people destroying public property because they don't want gays in their neighborhood, in their park. They get the front page.
But nothing about human beings being hurt physically for being gay.
Or being raided or anything of that sort. Two tiny pieces buried in the paper. One, look how large that article is for the front page of the New York Times.
Right.
So, as people would say, different times, different things, but nonetheless, it was a clear indication of even where the paper of record was off point.
Right. Well, in all due respect, to this day, they still are, in my opinion. On many things.
As are so many things.
Right. There you go.
But so here there was a generation gap that happened that night between the Mattachine Society, which was a more established group of people who wanted to fit in, didn't want to make waves, and the young people who actually raided, who fought back after the raid, who were young and wanted to be identified as who they were. They no longer wanted to live in the shadows. They wanted to be out and open. And so this is the sign that the Mattachine Society put in the window of Stonewall, trying to remind people that we must act accordingly. And then the Mattachine magazine, which are these two, didn't cover the riots until first in August and then in September, even though it took place in June. Even Time magazine, a mainstream publication, took those acts more seriously than some of the publications from within the community. After Stonewall was closed, people still wanted a place to dance. And so they started a place called the Gay Liberation Front, and that opened in what is now Soho in a closed firehouse. So the dancing continued, but now people felt a little bit more liberated than they did before. And then the beginning of Pride. So Stonewall's anniversary is 1969, and the first Pride was in June 1970.
Okay, we're coming back out to, I believe, the archives?
Well, first we're going to go into the other gallery space.
We're going to another gallery space and then the archives as well. So
Yeah.
this is the entranceway foyer here.
And then in this space, we have a unique exhibit by a New York Westchester-based artist, Adam Cho, who works in China. And he's the first, as to my knowledge, the first Asian American to be exhibited here. The plates on this wall that you're looking at right now are by the person he considered a mentor. Although he never met him, he was dead before he had an opportunity to meet. But he took a very traditional format and he mixed and mashed those pictures to make people take notice and to think. And his plates and the work that he created from these plates are now in the Smithsonian. This box is the only box that didn't go to the Smithsonian and is a gift to us. So this will go into the Stonewall archives when this exhibit comes down.
Why is the face removed from that one?
Because he used that face on different plates. Or he put it in different plates and used the picture on the plates. And then this is Adam's work, where he took a very conventional Asian form, photos or pictures on China, and then used AI and other sources to change the images to something that would be certainly more controversial, certainly not something you would see historically in China, but it's a conversation piece and sort of fun.
It's very beautiful. He's very, very talented.
And he works out of White Plains in New York.
So to be clear, is he? Did you say he's painting on there, or some kind of printing technique?
They use a way of creating the image and then firing it so that it stays. Okay. But he has to formulate and manipulate the images. So it's a multi-layer process.
Very nice.
And then we can go into the archive.
Adam Chow. Very nice. Paul Fasana and Robert S. Graham Archives. And who were they?
Paul Fasano worked in the archive for numbers of years and left a legacy that still helps us maintain the archives today. Okay. So, an important figure, and that's why this archive carries his name. The archive itself has millions of documents. So if you stacked the paper up, it would go up one side and down the other side of the Empire State Building. And there's enough paper that would go around the block a few times. So there's a lot of stuff in here.
And this space, or do you have off-site?
Well, we do have stuff off-site, but that's just this stuff.
This feels like it's very much temperature controlled.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And so
low humidity and all that.
Yes, and monitored. So this gives you an idea of what the inside the shelves look like. We have things
Take a quick walk down and up, if you could.
We have things ranging from the gavel that Nancy Pelosi used when they killed Don't Ask, Don't Tell legislation. We have a letter from Bob Dole that criticizes...
Where's that gavel? Can we see it?
I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look it up.
You'd probably have to put gloves on to handle
it. And actually, I think I can find it.
I'd love to see something like that.
We have a letter that Bob Dole sent chastising Bill Clinton for trying to allow gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military. Ironically, Bill Clinton ended up defeating Bob Dole when Bob Dole ran against him for president. So it's an interesting situation.
You know, it's almost like, who cares? If you're willing to fight for this country and our collective beliefs, I think a lot of politicians do that because their constituents or their base might be Bible, involved people, and Middle America, whatever you want to call it, or from all sides of the country, and they feel they'll lose those votes if they say okay to this.
Right. So instead of informing people and educating people, they play into the prejudices, and that's why Bob Dole lost.
Yeah, because instead of like saying, okay, they're willing to fight and die for this country, and they're going to be held to the same, physical standards and training standards as everybody else, let them fight. Let them support the country. Instead, you take a whole population, you make them more bitter about the political environment.
Well, you create animosity, but you also enhance the hate.
Right.
Because if I'm excluding you because you're not good.
Right.
And then those supporters say, well, if you think they're not good and the government thinks they're not good, then they must be bad, so we should beat them up, or we should put them out, or we should do whatever.
Right.
And that creates many, many more serious problems.
And an interest in full disclosure, and I've been honest since we've been here, I do believe in the Bible. I do believe. I am a Christian. But I've never been judgmental towards people. I just haven't. I believe you let people do what they feel led to do, or you said it's not a choice, right?
Right.
So again, it becomes between them and their creator and their partner. It's not nobody's business. I don't care if you believe in the Bible or not. My belief, and I'm sure, I don't know what yours is, faith-wise, is that God gave us a free will. So again, it's between me and the people around me and my creator. It's nobody's business to legislate morality. I never felt it is. So
I would agree with that.
Okay. Let's go see some more of this beautiful
So-
archive.
These boxes here and all the way down are filled with T-shirts, all representing different activities. So theater, music, television, organizations, pride, all kinds of things where people celebrate, and some of those celebrations include getting T-shirts made. And then these are flat files, so there are letters and books and correspondence in here. You saw what these look like, and there's a lot of them on both sides of the aisle. We do have a very, I don't know how familiar you or your audience is with Anita Bryant, but
Oh yeah, she was the orange juice Tropicana person,
well, she was the Florida Orange Juice,
and she was like Miss
spokesperson.
Florida USA or something too.
She was Miss Oklahoma,
Miss Oklahoma.
but she also
We're showing our age.
but she also led a campaign against a gay ordinance that promoted equality, and she got it withdrawn. And so it became a big fight, and she traveled around the country talking about children's and parental rights and keep these people out of our schools and don't do this and don't do that. And ultimately she lost her battle, but here's just one of the many, many things that we have in our collection.
Can I hold that? That's a piece of history there for sure.
Yeah, just
There you go. I remember Anita Bryant.
She-
This is real history from the early 70s.
Yep, her tagline was "A day without orange juice is like a day without sunshine."
There you go. I thought in her case, didn't she come out as being gay later on or no?
oh, no,
No, not
no.
her. Okay.
Her granddaughter,
Okay.
but not her. No, she still says that God talks to her. She's quite elderly. She went back to Oklahoma. She lived in Florida for a very long time, but is not here anymore. Yet, there are politicians in Florida now that use the exact same language that she used in the 70s. So, as much as things change, things don't change so much.
Right.
This is a guitar that was used in a concert for the LGBTQ community. The musician donated it. And then we have over here different games. And
Can you get the edge of the game?
this
Ricky,
is, this is always fun.
Ricky Martin.
Ricky Martin's leather pants from one of his concerts.
Let's see if I can fit him into a concert for you. I don't think so. He's a skinny man.
Yeah. So these are the actual pants that Ricky Martin wore at one of his concerts.
Very nice. Let me hold
I
them up.
can't.
See if you could put them. See if they'll fit me there.
Yeah, see so. You'd have to grow.
Ricky Martin's pants right here. William Steele. Check me out. You know, the guy is an incredible singer. He did Vida Loca, right?
Yes, he did.
1, 2, 3, 4, living the Vida Loca. There they go. He did the Vida Loca in these things. God knows what they've seen.
Well, we've had them for a while, so I don't know how much they actually sell. But he donated them.
Very nice.
And then you can see there's artwork. There are magazines. There are newspapers. It's a very extensive collection of materials.
Okay, we going back further?
Yep, we're gonna go. We can walk around this way so that Mary can go back the way she came, or not.
You want to stay on that side and film us from that side, or whatever's easier?
It doesn't matter.
So what are these Pulp Fiction and all these books?
Those are books. Those were books that were created at a specific period in time, and it was a way to get LGBTQ stories out. They were very inexpensively made. They were not big runs.
Okay.
So they have tremendous value now.
Sort of like what you call a romance novel, but geared towards gays.
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
But because of those limited runs, people will pay an awful lot of money for those books now.
Okay.
And then here we do digitization. So this is for 3D digitization, that's 2D digitization, entering materials. Now, it wasn't all that long ago that no politician would take money from somebody who was thought to be gay, and they would even return the money if a contribution was made. And then things changed around the Bill Clinton era, and certainly by Gore Lieberman, when they organized the gay community and asked the gay community to help win elections.
Whose
And
signature's on that black and white?
Al Gore.
Does this say Al Gore?
Yep.
Oh,
And
Tipper.
Al
Tipper.
Gore
Okay.
and Tipper.
Got it. Very cool.
And Lieberman, who was the Connecticut U.S. Senator, very conservative, very religious, was very outspoken on LGBTQ rights, believing that if you limit the rights of any group because of who they are, you run the risk of every group being limited at a certain point.
I didn't know he was so wise. I didn't pay attention, but that's a good observation. That's true.
And being that he was Jewish, he was very sensitive to exactly how fast people can turn on their neighbors if you allow for hate and prejudice.
May I ask you your faith? Is it something you don't share?
I don't share.
Okay. I am a Christian, and my significant other is a Jewish woman. So, my fiance, Mary. How far along are you on digitizing?
We do a lot of digitization. We put it, as soon as we get it ready, it goes up on our website. So it's always available.
So it'll be searchable once it's digitized?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But there's so many millions of documents, it will take a very long time. It's a very expensive and tedious proposition.
You should get some college student interns. I know other libraries that do that.
We have done that, but it has to be supervised,
Right.
because it has to be laid out properly, and then it's
Handled, stored.
and then the marking of it so that you can find it takes time. It takes time.
Where's that gavel? Let's see it.
Let me see if I can. Okay.
We're going to see Nancy Pelosi gavel here.
Okay, so that should be, could be here. Let's see. I'm gonna have to go the other way.
Should I spin this one too?
No, I can only do one at a time.
Okay. I'm just asking for a friend, but is there like historical gay porn here somewhere in your archives?
Oh yeah,
We're just asking for a friend.
there is porn. It's a part of straight and gay history.
There you go. Part of world history.
Yes, I mean, you can go back to ancient Greece, ancient Rome.
Be careful what you get on camera here, because I might not be able to air it without blurring it out. There's some artwork that is nude. You can cut again if you want. Or you just keep rolling and we'll cut it out later. Okay. You know what your timestamp is right about now?
For this section 27.
Okay. So then we'll take out like a minute or something.
I thought it was here, but I wonder if it's under. Maybe under B. Let's check.
Maybe P for Pelosi.
No, it's not. It's. Yeah, is that under? It's there?
It's donated by Barney Frick. So
Yeah,
it's
I know, but I was
Thank
looking
you.
under F there. Nah.
Okay, so let me get on the side of the table with him. Barney Frank. So when I see something very, very special here, this is a real, legitimate museum quality archive of historical significance. Barney Frank donated it?
Yes. Nancy Pelosi gave it to Barney, and then Barney donated it to us.
Refresh my memory and my audience. Who was Barney Frank? Because I think he was a politician. but-
Barney Frank was the congressman from Massachusetts.
Okay. I know the name, but I couldn't place who he was.
So, as it says, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House. And this is the gavel that
I've got to give it, hold it for a second. There you go. Thank you.
is the actual gavel that she used when they rang out "Don't Ask, Don't Tell."
So Nancy Pelosi's actual gavel, and he's kind enough to let me hold it for a second, and I think it's pretty fascinating to hold on to a piece of history. I think if we're going to see anything else, we need to glove up, but for the meantime, he's being very cautious with these items. This environment is controlled, environmental controls for humidity and everything else, and
So
that's incredible.
so the only woman to serve as Speaker of the House, and some very important legislation and changes in legislation.
Oh, he had it under the last name for
Right.
Frank donation.
Right. No, and but we have letters, the same letters, but different items in different places.
So in here you have Fort Lauderdale, front runners, Fort Lauderdale, freedom to marry. What are these different legal proclamations?
Or the articles of covering that period of time,
Judy Garland, for some reason. What?
because Judy Garland is iconic in the LGBTQ community.
What do you have of hers?
It's nothing from her per se. It's just materials about her.
Okay. So we're gonna ease on out of here. Okay. So I believe that concludes our really quick tour of the archives. It's extensive. We're gonna sit down and do an interview here in a moment. The Village People.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Presented by Randy Jones of the Village.
That is so cool. I guess it's a gold record. Sale of more than, what does it say? How many? A little blurry. 500,000 copies of Casablanca.
Yeah, 500,000.
Macho Man.
copies.
This is a gold record from the real village people, donated by
By the Village people.
by the Village People, and it's for the song Macho Man, for selling, what, 500,000 copies
Yeah.
from Casablanca Records.
Which
That's-
also did Donna Summer.
Also did Donna Summer. I remember the label on all my albums when I was a kid, loving the disco music. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And we're back with Robert Kesten. He is the executive director of the Stonewall Museum in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Beautiful here. They are expanding their footprint nationwide. We just saw an incredible archive. We had an incredible tour, and now we're going to ask him the tough questions, which for him just roll off his tongue because he's fascinating to talk to. So give us a little bit of your background. How did you get into this? What did you do before this? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a director of this place.
Well, for quite a number of years, I traveled around the world working on promoting and informing people on how to integrate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights into their lives. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a very interesting document. It was 75 years old as of December 10th of last year. The chair of the committee that drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was Eleanor Roosevelt, the first U.S. representative to the United Nations, because the United Nations was started after World War II. So this document came out after World War II, and it was the world's official response to the Holocaust.
Oh.
With the intention of creating a document that gave you 30 points that if you followed, there would be no more war, there would be no violence, there would be no prejudice. Nobody thought that by issuing a declaration that would happen, but that over time it would be accepted and it would change the way people lived.
So the hope was like a touchstone of like, well,
Correct.
let's rely on this, as if people of faith might say, let's rely on what the Bible says, let's rely on what this says.
It's
But this
something-
is condensed.
It complements the Bible. It
Right.
complements the rule of law. It complements all of those things. So it's unique in the sense that anybody can do it. There are 30 articles that basically say my human rights end at the tip of my nose because that's where yours begin. And I cannot do anything that jeopardizes anybody else's rights, just like they can't do anything to jeopardize mine. That we are all in this together.
And that's a good point, because I mean, even in my shows when we talk about all the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats and the vitriol, I always say, why can't we go back to something as simple what Rodney King said? Can't we all just get along? Or even Martin Luther King. I mean, these people were, in his own way, despite what you think of Rodney King, who was brutalized by police, he was brilliant in the simplicity of his statement. Why can't we all just get along? Respect each other's space, and let people do what they want to do, or what they're led to do, or what they're born to do.
As long as they don't hurt anybody
As long as you're not hurting anybody else. And I thought that was always the standard, and it seems like it's shifting all the time. So how does that transition into what you're doing here?
Well, I was working on planning for the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and a friend of mine said, "You've got to apply for this job." And I said, "No, thank you." And he nagged and nagged. And so I said, "I'm just going to apply just to get him off my case." So I said, "Okay." I sent in a resume. I didn't think that I would ever hear from them. And then I did. And then it went through months and months of interviews, and they offered me the job. And I was probably sitting with my parents when I got the call. And they said, "You have to take it. You have to take it."
It's right up your alley.
So I came to Fort Lauderdale and took the job.
Okay, so we're going to get into exactly what happened at the Stonewall Inn /bar/gay club in New York City, June 1969. I want you to give us a summation of what happened there and why we're touring this place and why preserving this history and raising awareness is so important.
Well, for one reason, the gay liberation movement is the composite of all the movements that came before. So the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement, all of those things built on layers of each other's experiences. And ironically or not, the LGBTQ community is based on all of those communities. There is not one community, not even Catholics or Jews or anywhere else, where you won't find gay people. You'll find them in every profession, on every side of every issue. There are the log cabin Republicans, there are Democrats, there are Russian gay people, and there are Ukrainian gay people. There are Israeli gay people and Palestinian gay people. We are everywhere. So anybody who thinks that this is some strange configuration or mistake doesn't seem to realize that we're in every one of your families.
In 1969, a lot of it in this country was kept very much under wraps, and the Stonewall
Everywhere.
The Stonewall incident is significant.
But the point is that the gay people in your lives are the ones who have walked in your shoes, because they've had to pretend to be just like you. So here was a place in the village where people felt that they could be themselves. They felt the freedom to dance, the freedom to drink, the freedom to relax and unwind. And they believed, because the police were paid off, they believed because they paid a fee to enter the space, that they were somewhat safe. They knew bars around them were being raided, but they still believed that there would be something special about Stonewall.
Now, Stonewall, for you guys, I do true crime and crime prevention. We have former organized crime detective Lou Ballesteri. We do Mafia Mondays. It's interesting to know that the Stonewall was owned and operated by the Mafia, i.e. the Genovese family in those days, 1969. And so they did pay the police off, except for they couldn't reach the public morals detectives. And what happened?
And so public morals and the police headquarters sent people in for the vice squad without informing the local police, because they knew the police locally would inform the bar owners. And when they came in, they didn't expect any fight. They expected that they would go in, they would take people out, they would ruin a few lives, and it would be over. What happened is they got a riot, and they had to call in the local police. And interestingly enough, there was a guy by the name of Patrick, who was a Catholic priest, and he was there dancing. And Charlie, this police sergeant, who was from the local precinct, came in and saw Patrick and said, "I'm not arresting him." And he helped Patrick and some of his friends escape.
Right.
Because there was a limit, and Charlie was not going to arrest a police officer, a priest,
right.
a Catholic priest. And so the energy changed when the locals came in. They had to put down the riot, but obviously they didn't, because it lasted for 4 days. But that came out of this feeling that this was our one safe spot. This was the place where we could dance. This was the place where we could be who we are.
Right.
And that, if that's going to be taken away, then we have nothing left to lose. So we're going to fight back. Just like the blacks were fighting back, just like women were fighting back, just like laborers were fighting back, just like every other group that has found itself under the thumb of a society that just doesn't want them around. And that's exactly what happened. And from that day on, things started to change. Not rapidly in the very beginning, but ultimately, because of the expertise of people from all those other movements shifting into the LGBTQ movement, because people in those other movements were part of that community as well.
Right.
And when they no longer felt as comfortable in those other movements, and they had a place to go, they decided that they would go there, and they brought their expertise with them. So we started off with a brain trust that was second to none. The best people at communications, the best people in design, the best people in organizing, they all moved into the LGBTQ movement and the liberation movement.
Okay, so where do we find ourselves today? How did this come to be founded as a museum?
Well, it started as a library,
Okay.
1973, so just a few years after. It was founded by a 17-year-old in Hollywood, Florida, who started collecting books, and then he had a friend who started a small archive, so it became the Stonewall Library and Archive. And then it grew, and it grew too much for their homes, and so it moved to Fort Lauderdale, where adults joined in and helped organize and get it to where it is today, 52 years later.
So, and the Stonewall is looking to expand nationwide. What are your plans? What are your goals? What are the objectives for the museum and for the
Our objectives are to keep people informed. There isn't knowledge out there that isn't of value. We study things that have nothing to do with us because it's important to know. The more we know, the better people we can be.
Absolutely.
And our objective, our mission, is to preserve and protect this material, but also to share it so that people can learn from the experiences of these millions of people who have lived lives that are part of the fabric of history. And history is just that, it's the fabric. And everybody is a thread. No matter how significant you are or how insignificant you are a thread in the fabric of history. And when we start to unravel that fabric, we are no longer teaching history. We could be teaching biography, we could be teaching war, we could be teaching something specific, but we're not teaching history.
Right.
And the only way human beings can move forward is if we learn history with everybody being included. And one of the examples I like to give is John Adams became the second president of the United States. John Adams wasn't particularly wealthy. He didn't have estates like Washington did or Thomas Jefferson did. He lived on a farm in Massachusetts, and he was a lawyer. But when he was vice president for 8 years under Washington, and then president for 4 years, he didn't have his law practice. So it was Abigail Adams, John's wife, who ran the farm in Braintree, Massachusetts, and raised their children, and supported John so he could be president of the United States, and he could be vice president of the United States. And Abigail Adams didn't have the right to vote, and she didn't have many other rights because women were property.
Right.
And yet, if we don't know the history of Abigail Adams, we don't know American history. People think, okay, George Washington, the father of the country, the general who won the Revolutionary War, are not aware that the breadwinner in the Washington family was Martha Washington.
There you have it.
She had the big estates. She had the slaves. George Washington had some, but nothing compared to Martha. So once again, George was able to do what he did because of Martha's wealth. John Adams was able to do a lot of what he did because Abigail Adams was very smart and very capable and able to help sustain him. So if we don't know the whole picture, we are not really providing people with history. And then we are stuck with the belief that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree and could never tell a lie. Well, no politician cannot tell a lie. They all tell lies.
There you have it. What is your educational background? I'm just curious. You seem like you're very, very articulate and wise guy, you know. You have to be some history in there.
I did take some history. Definitely, my degree is in history. But it was a very peculiar route to getting educated.
Okay. So we're having a good time learning a lot. I've learned a lot, and we're glad to be here, and we want to let him shout out to anybody he wants to in this experience to spread this message. Is there somebody you want to give a shout out to or give some credit to?
Well, there are plenty of people to give credit to, but I think that what's important is that what we offer, because of the archive, because of the library, because of the museum, is unique. There are other organizations that do parts of those things, but nobody else does all of those things, and we need space. So anybody who wants their name on a building, we accept money.
There you go.
But it's important to recognize that we have an exhibit called Standing on the Shoulders of Heroes. And we travel that show around the country. We were in New York not too long ago, Philadelphia, and now we're going to New Orleans. And those people are people who risked something to be out.
Right.
So we have Bayard Rustin, who was the mastermind behind Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington. We have Larry Kramer, who was an activist in New York, who risked tons of things by being an AIDS activist, creating some very important New York institutions. We have Billie Jean King, who gave up millions of dollars in sponsorships when she came out, and now has the National Tennis Center named after her.
She's in Florida too, I believe.
No, she's in New York.
Oh, she's in New York now?
She is in New York. So there are many people that risked a lot in order to stand up and say, no, this is who we are, and this is who we are going to be, and this is what we do. But there's only one National Tennis Center, and it carries the name not only of a woman, but of a lesbian. So it's a very interesting world that we live in, especially with all the prejudice that still goes on around it.
What I would like to ask you, I ask a lot of my guests after we do a show, it's a little bit of a personal question. If the good Lord or whatever your belief is takes you home today, what would you personally want your legacy to be to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones? What do you want?
It's very simple, that I tried. I mean, no individual is going to change few individuals will change the world, but I tried.
But he tried. And with that, we wrap it up with our beautiful tour of the Stonewall Museum in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Stonewall Inn still exists in New York City, in Greenwich Village.
Yes.
And we're going to put some links in the description if you want to check out the website and any way that you could possibly donate to further spreading the message. Because we do true crime, and I'm one of these people, look, as a conservative, I believe that people need to just really get along because we're not allowed to be in each other's space victimizing people for whatever reason. I don't want to be victimized for being a Christian, and somebody doesn't want to be victimized for being gay. And if you victimize me, I'm a crime victim. If you victimize him or his friends or his loved ones, they're crime victims. And this is abhorrent no matter what side of the aisle you fall upon. This isn't a political issue. So I thank you for having us in and educating me to quite a few things. And thank you again. You're very humble host.
Thank you for spending the time here. We appreciate it. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.